The weather has calmed down a bit, and during the night there was even a bit of frost again, and many of the vehicles had a chance to get back out of the mud. However, the further we retreat, the muddier and more churned up the roads become. Under the leadership of a young lieutenant, our squadron is more often than not assigned as rear guard, our job being to hold the enemy back for as long as we can, and if possible, mount a counterattack. But as a rule, the Soviets attack us in massive force, and without suitable heavy weapons, we have nothing to match them. When they charge us, after shouting hurrah, it is often as much as we can do to escape in one piece. As a result, our little band gradually becomes smaller and smaller. It is quiet here to begin with. We can neither see nor hear anything of the enemy, but we know he has been advancing relentlessly and can appear at any time. He has realized that there is no continuous front line anymore, and he often just leaves us sitting in our trenches when we prove awkward for him and simply bypasses us on our left or right flank. This is apparent from the many fires and clouds of smoke to our left and right, which the enemy leaves behind along his route. As I improve the field of fire in front of my HNG with Franz Kramer, the first enemy artillery rounds scream in towards us. The barrage is not directed at anything in particular. A bit of disruptive fire, says Valdi, who is standing in at a foxhole to my side and behind me and is scanning the rolling hills in front of us with his field glasses. After a little while, I hear him yell, "They are coming at us like a swarm of ants." I look through the telescopic sight and see them too. The Soviets are moving towards us like an army of termites, hell-bent on destruction. Valdi estimates that the range is still 3 or 4 kilometers. They're moving slowly, at an almost leisurely pace, but they are making progress at a constant speed. They could be on us in about an hour's time. After a few minutes, however, we decide that the mass of troops is not moving directly at us, but rather towards our right. Looks like they might actually pass us by, I say. I don't think so, says Valdi, we'll probably just catch his right flank. In the meantime, the Russian guns are firing further ahead, pounding the vacant terrain immediately in front of their slowly moving infantry. Valdi is right. If they continue in this manner, we will brush their right flank. The first thing is that we must move, but when they get dangerously close, we should open fire. Valdi agrees. The lieutenant sees it differently. He calls over to us and says that both machine guns should open fire now. That's crazy. At a range of 1.5 kilometers, it is a total waste of ammunition. And we will give away our position, says Valdi, annoyed. So I wait. But then the other weapon opens up, so I fire off a belt too. The brown mass in front of us doesn't stop for a moment, but continues forward as if nothing has happened. Then my gun jams. I curse the enameled steel cartridges. As so often happens, one has got stuck in the barrel. I normally only use this type of ammunition where the enemy is still some way off and needs to be disrupted while he is getting ready. But I always have a few cases of good ammunition in reserve and use this when the enemy makes his frontal assault. I still need 1 or 2 spare barrels in case we go into action here. I go over to the bunker to look for our ammunition carrier to get another barrel. The Russians are still a long way away. But then someone yells, "Tank!" Seconds later, rounds hit the top of the bunker. The ATG fires one shot, then the tank destroys it. I run out of the bunker, trying to get to my machine gun. The tank shells explode all around me. I leap into the next foxhole. Then I see 3 T-34s approaching from the left, heading directly towards the bunker. The men in the trenches are already out of their holes and running back. 2 tanks fire on the fleeing soldiers, while the third is circling the bunker and opening up. One round tears the escaping ATG group apart. Then the turret hatch on the T-34 opens and several hand grenades are thrown into the bunker entrance. My muscles tighten. I want to jump up and run behind the others. Too late. The tank has just waltzed over Fritz Hammond's HNG and flattened it. Now it is lumbering past me, following the other two. To get up now would mean certain death. I have to stay in my hole and see what happens. Both Valdi and Kramer are still in their foxhole. Fender should still be in the bunker, or has he been hit? The thread by which my life is hanging continues to be very thin as I look over to Valdi and Kramer. They are not firing, but working on a machine gun barrel in which no doubt another cartridge has become stuck. At this moment, the attacking Soviets are getting unpleasantly close. Then I hear Wachmeister Fender. What's the matter? Why don't you shoot? Fender is standing by the bunker, holding his left arm close to his body. He must have been wounded. Cartridge jams, and all barrels, Valdi yells back, trying desperately to release the jammed cartridges. Finally, he manages it. He replaces the barrel in its socket, closes the breech, and pulls the ammunition belt tight. The machine gun rattles away and sends off 2 long bursts. The Soviets in front of us throw themselves down on the ground. Then the gun jams again. It is exasperating. I know the feeling. When the barrel is hot and even the smallest imperfections have built up inside, the problem starts all over again. The only solution is to fit a new barrel and let the others cool off, or use good quality ammunition. I hope Valdi realizes this, but over the last few months he's only been using his submachine gun and doesn't have the routine anymore. If that machine gun doesn't fire, we'll all be dead men. The Russians will pull us out of our foxholes and then either shoot us or take us prisoner. Valdi and Kramer are keeping their heads down, messing around with the barrels, while rifle bullets are zipping all around them. Valdi is swearing and praying, every now and then glancing up at the Soviets moving ever nearer towards us. I too am panic-stricken and blame myself. Why didn't I stay where I was? Before all is lost, I just have to try everything possible to get that machine gun to fire. Up until now, I've always been able to depend on my machine gun. In panic and fright, I yell through the ever-increasing inferno of rifle fire. I'm coming, but one of you must get out of the foxhole. The hole is too narrow for 3. Valdi knows that too. We leap at the same time, and Valdi disappears in a neighboring foxhole with 2 strides. I have much further to run, through the rain of bullets, and I feel a hot graze on my left forearm. It's not much, but I can feel blood running out of my sleeve. With a final leap, I land in the hole and start to look at the barrels. Just as I thought, cartridges stuck in both of them, both with their bottoms punched out. I'm going to need more time to clear them out. I see a couple of soldiers at the bunker. I need spare barrels. I yell to them, and then try to free the cartridges with a special tool. The brown figures in front of us are now almost so close that we will soon see their faces. By this time, I can hear Valdi firing his submachine gun, and rifle fire is also coming from the bunker. So there are some riflemen left after all. However, against this great horde, a few salvos of rifle fire are worthless. Is this, then, the end? That's certainly the way it looks. I never really thought it would finish like this. Why should I be an exception? Now it's death or imprisonment, maybe something worse. We've heard so much about the Red Army and how they treat their prisoners. Quite automatically, I unbutton my holster and feel the cool handle of my pistol in my hand. Then someone behind me coughs. Here you are, 2 barrels from the other machine gun. I turn around and recognize our ammunition carrier, who amidst a rain of bullets from the enemy have leapt up from the foxhole and thrown us 2 barrels in their protective covers, landing about a meter behind us. He can see Franz and I trying to reach the package with our hands. Then he jumps up again and buds back. He manages just 2 strides before he falls silently to the ground and remains motionless. The bullets keep ripping into his dead body. He has given his young life for his comrades. My hands trembling, I open the sleeves and pull out a new barrel, which I lock into the gun. Franz Kramer, has already brought out a new belt of a good brass ammunition. I pull the belt tight and close the breech. My entire body is shaking like a leaf. The first Soviet soldiers are already running towards us. But then my machine gun starts to chatter. An indescribable feeling of relief comes over me as the belt flows through as if oiled. The attackers at the front start falling like flies to the ground. Franz Kramer has finally opened all the ammunition cases and is feeding in new belts with both hands to make sure they will pull through without any stoppages. How often I have stood behind a machine gun and felt the strength embodied in this mechanical purveyor of death, but never have I used it with such relief as at this moment. I see our enemy falling and dying. I see them bleeding from their wounds, hear their whimpering cries, and have, believe me, not a spark of pity or compassion for them. A sort of madness has come over me. It's the revenge for the crazy terror and despair which I experienced just now, and it's retaliation for the death of Josef Spica, the ATG crew, and the others who became casualties. Revenge and retaliation. Remorseless and with hatred and retaliation in their hearts, men can win battles, and quite ordinary soldiers can be turned into celebrities. Fear is converted into hatred, anger, and calls for retribution. In this way, you are motivated to fight on, even decorated with medals as a hero. But heroes have to stay alive so that others can see their medals. They are supposed to inspire the weaker among us. But then, as I look at our enemies lying there on the ground, all my pent-up aggression vanishes. I'm thinking clearly once more. In the far distance, beyond my firing range, the Soviets continue, unconcerned. The mass has not allowed its right flank to be affected by my machine gun. There's only a large heap of Russians lying on their stomachs in a shallow depression in front of us. We can only make them out when they raise their heads. I've fired almost 6 cases of ammunition so far. The palm of my right hand burns as if on fire because I changed the hot barrels in seconds without taking time to grab the protection of the asbestos rag. We only have half a case of good ammunition left. The Russians in front of us are motionless. They are less than 50 meters away, but in a really tricky situation. They have cover only when they lie prone. The second they move, I shoot. It must be awful for them, I reckon. At this range, if they all suddenly jump up and charge, things could get pretty awkward. Interrupting these thoughts is a sudden call from the hollow. Pan, Pam. At the same time, the steel helmet is held up on a rifle and waved back and forth. Again, the voice. Pan, Pam. Not shoot. We come. I don't trust them. How should I respond? I wrap my hand around the grip with a finger on the trigger. Can we rely on them? We are only a handful of men. What if I let them come forward without firing, and then they suddenly run us down? Throw your guns down, I call back. The one who did the talking slowly rises to his feet and speaks to those lying on the ground. I wonder about how much confidence he has in us. Some of them stand up, but they are still holding their rifles. Throw away your guns, Valdi yells at them. The Russians throw themselves flat again as a result of the shouting, leaving just the fellow who has done the talking standing, with his hands stretched out over his head, waving from side to side and calling out, "Don't shoot, don't shoot." Then he speaks to the others again, and then slowly, one at a time, they also stand up, this time without their weapons. I don't feel very comfortable seeing so many Russians in front of me, and my finger is still ready to squeeze the trigger. Our men are coming back, Findra calls out to us from the bunker. I glance back quickly, and they are no longer so far away. That was the reason then why they decided to surrender. They thought that we were about to counterattack, and that they would be killed in any case. I breathe more easily in the knowledge that the danger is now finally over. The Russians now come towards us with their arms in the air and are collected by Finder and 3 soldiers. There are more than 60 of them, all with good equipment, but they are not youngsters, and officers among them. I learned that the 50-year-old Russian who speaks some German is a teacher from Kiev. His former supply unit apparently came to the front only 3 weeks ago. He had been indoctrinated in the belief that he must never surrender to the Germans, as they were known to mutilate their prisoners before they killed them. In answer to the question why he still surrendered, he tells us that during the last few weeks of the German retreat, a number of Russian prisoners had been able to escape, and they had met up with them and been told that they had been put to work by the Germans with the rear echelons. These prisoners hadn't mentioned anything about acts of brutality, although they understood that they'd have to be cautious if they got amongst the SSians. We had no idea what the drill was in the rear areas. On the front line, it was all you could do to stay alive. I have often heard tales from Russian prisoners about the supposed treatment of POWs by German frontline troops. These stories serve their propaganda purpose, making sure that the Russian soldier would prefer to fire his last cartridge and fight to the death rather than surrender. There's no doubt that it was this fear that often persuaded Russian soldiers to put up unbelievable resistance in completely hopeless situations. I've seen atrocities perpetrated on German soldiers, and the fear of similar treatment is greater than the fear of dying in battle. Many incidents involving acts of brutality and murder were committed by the Russians against their own people too, and they definitely tried to blame these on the German troops, especially during the turbulent times of our retreat. As the prisoners are transported to the rear, it again becomes quiet. Shortly before nightfall, the clouds quickly cover the sky and a light drizzle starts to fall. Wachtmeister Finder says that we have to vacate the position by 2100 hours. A few kilometers further west, the rest of the unit is collected and a new defensive perimeter created. Although the advancing enemy is quickly stopped, we nevertheless have to move off again at once since the Russians have moved forward on both flanks without meeting any resistance in an attempt to take us in a pincer movement. We are repeatedly trying to hold the enemy back, but it is a hopeless venture, and we are busy running almost all the time. As soon as a soldier is on the retreat, nothing will persuade him to stay in one place to await an onrushing enemy. On 28 February, we consolidate under the leadership of our well-respected squadron chief, who following his recovery has returned to us. We hold the enemy back for a while here, and even launch a number of successful counterattacks. But as the Soviets quickly begin to envelop us on both sides, we are forced to withdraw again. Behind the village of Petropavlovka, we are spread out in all directions when we are suddenly attacked. We've been without sleep for days and are totally exhausted. So we, as the rear guard of our unit, have been looking for quarters in the last houses of the village. After a while, the Soviets come storming into the village, yelling hurrah, and mowing down everything in their path. I just have enough time to escape out a rear window with Otto Kruke. I can't take my machine gun with me. It wouldn't do me any good. In any case, I'm out of ammunition. We haul ourselves through the mud and slime, tired and exhausted. The ice-cold easterly wind whips through our starved bones. The hunger gnaws at our intestines. During the night, we seek shelter in the huts. They are almost always full. The men lie stacked up like herrings, helping each other to keep warm. Their faces are dirty and pale. They listen intently to every little noise outside, reacting to anything out of the ordinary. Only a few have got weapons with them. When each morning breaks, and assuming Ivan hasn't driven us out of the houses with his shouting, we pull ourselves together and stumble on. In every village, we come to meet up with new groups of German soldiers fleeing from the pursuing Soviet army. Some of them have misjudged the speed of the Russian advance. These men are mostly rear echelon troops from field bakeries, repair and maintenance shops, and supply troops who have never seen the front line. Once in a while, we even come across someone whose uniform has never come into contact with dirt. These are the administrative managers of the army. You can always pick them out by their tailored uniforms. They are the finest soldiers of the Reich, who manage all the goodies the army gets, the sort of supplies which the average soldier never even lays eyes on. It was days before the yelling behind us stopped, but instead we can now see the Soviet soldiers marching forward on both sides of us, almost near enough to touch. They do not even bother to get into position to fire on us. We are a sorry sight, tired and bedraggled. They do take the liberty of taunting us with victory pose as they pass by on their little wagons, loaded with all kinds of things. This seems to me to be downright grotesque, to see the enemy so near at hand just marching by instead of fighting with him, and to be shown only threatening fists and ridicule. Occasionally, their advance units run into strong German opposition. Then they withdraw and leave behind masses of murdered Russian women and children in the villages, hacked to death along the muddy roads and in the houses. Above all, there remains an unremitting hatred towards the Germans and towards all those who have served them during the occupation. They don't ask if those who have served have done so voluntarily or if they have been forced to do it. It's enough that they have lived under German occupation. The Russian army demands obedience to the patriotic slogan, "Rather dead than enslaved." The same words always come from those on the winning side, the motive always being hatred for all who think differently. If everyone temporarily forced to do something against his will, or his convictions had to be struck down, very soon there would be nobody left. These women, murdered by their own forces, were really only normal, everyday women. They didn't want to work for their occupiers, they only wanted to survive. The hatred for those who had lived under the Germans has become bestial. The thorn of revenge sits so deep in their flesh that they can't stop killing even their own people. And then they tell us in their propaganda leaflets that they will treat us, their enemies, very well if we surrender. But so many of our soldiers did not have the chance to become prisoners. They were shot out of hand or bayoneted. Others were driven crazy and went for the attacking Soviets with their bare hands, or fell on their knees and begged for mercy. The Soviet soldiers just laughed as they massacred them. I didn't notice any prisoners being taken.